Hey everyone, this is Gabby.
And Karim.
And you're listening to the Making of an Incredible MD podcast by Allied to Health.
Tune in each week to hear us talk about the journey of getting into med school.
From GAMSAT to medical interviews, get the insider scoop from med students who have done it all before. So stay tuned and get ready to get med ready.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Making of an Incredible MD podcast. This is Karim.
And Gabby. We're here for the second episode of the year, continuing on with our GAMSAT theme. Today we are focusing on section 2, but before we jump in, we will do an acknowledgement of country. So we would like to acknowledge the traditional and rightful owners of the land in which we are recording on, which is again Yorta Yorta land. We would like to pay our respect to the elders past, present and emerging, and we acknowledge that the land in which we are on always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Okay, so we spoke about section 1 last week, Karim, and now we're speaking about section 2. So do you have any specific memories, thoughts, feelings about section 2 that you'd like to share with the crowd?
Yeah, this was another one that I think I enjoyed a lot more than section 1 actually. Like section 2 with essay writing, it's quite, I found it difficult, but it was a lot more enjoyable than section 1 because in section 1 there's no creativity, there's a right answer you need to find. In section 2 it's all about creativity and your individual thoughts and opinions. So I actually had a lot of fun with it. I was just nervous in terms of my writing capabilities and could I actually write something that not only makes sense but is an enjoyable read for markers. Because this is the only section that actually gets marked by someone, so you have to think about that.
Yeah, true. And I guess we probably should mention, in case people don't know what section 2 is made up of, there are 2 essays that you need to write, one task A, one task B. You get given a quote set and have to write an essay based on that quote set. So the point is to pick out what the theme is and then write on that theme. And you have 60 minutes to do that, or 65 minutes if you include reading time, to write those 2 essays, which is quite of a push.
Yeah, it's a bit of a thing, actually. It's the only time in the GAMSAT where I really feel like you push for time.
Yeah.
Like section 3 maybe, but they've reduced the questions now. It used to be very long. But section 2, very push for time. Well,
I feel like I was pushed for time for every section, but that's just me. But yeah, I agree with Karim. Section 2 is a really nice part of the GAMSAT because it's different to section 1 and 3. You get this chance to have a little bit more freedom, write what you want to write, and you have a chance to express yourself and really show the marker what your thoughts and feelings and opinions are, which is really nice. And it's a chance for you to write something that is important and thought-provoking, which is challenging, but really a nice change from the rest of the GAMSAT.
And it's actually probably the only part of the GAMSAT that's applicable to real life, because there's no other job that you go for where, maybe actually, where you have to do sort of like an aptitude test, which essentially is what the GAMSAT is.
Yeah, true.
But writing your opinion is something you'll have to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So I think in that regard, probably more relevant than section 1 and section 3.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And people like to argue that section 2 is sort of like med interviews. Like they give you a topic and you have to express your opinion on it, but you just have to do it in a more formal written sense than what you do in the interviews where you're just discussing it to someone. So yeah, I sort of agree with that. But at the same time, it is important to remember that technically ASA aren't marking you on whether or not your opinions are correct or incorrect.
Yes.
They are marking you on how well you can convey your opinions, your ability to be able to verbally communicate, as well as your ability to be able to pick out what the topic actually is from the quote set given and write something that is memorable and thought-provoking.
Yeah. Your ability to articulate something, essentially.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, right?
Exactly.
Can you convey your idea? And I think it goes, if we're talking about what is the point of section 2, it's really, being able to discuss your point of view with someone else.
Yeah.
Which you'll have to do
every day
as a doctor or dentist. So it's really, really important that you have that skill before you get into medicine, because that's something I'm definitely looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. So that transitions well into study tips. Do you have any golden study tips, Karim?
Yep, so definitely practice writing your essays back to back. I found it a lot more exhausting having to write 2 essays in 1 hour than just practicing writing 1 essay in half an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely try practicing to time. And if you start off feeling like you need a little bit more, like 45 minutes instead, and shave, the minutes down to half an hour.
Shave them down.
Yeah, like that's definitely a good tip, I would say. Like, I think that's how I started. So I probably needed like 40 minutes to start it off, and then, with a bit more practices, got it down a bit. But definitely practice writing back to back, because coming up with 2 sets of ideas, limited planning time, half an hour to write in each, is much harder than just doing 5 minutes reading time in 1 essay.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I found hard was when I first started writing 2 essays back to back, those 2 essays would sort of just end up saying the same thing because I found it really hard to distinguish my thoughts between the 2 essays. So I ended up just merging the 2 topics into one, using like the same examples and things like that, which some people do, and maybe that's okay. But as I practiced a little bit more, I was able to make, 2 individual essays that were good enough to stand alone, that had different examples and different ideas in them, which is quite hard. So yeah, as soon as you can, start practicing writing 2 essays back to back under timed conditions, and start refining your process a little bit more so that you can get it done to a high standard within that time. And I think that ties in really well to my tip of making sure that you have a strategy or a game plan with your timing. So we spoke about this for section 1, same thing for section 2 and probably section 3. You need to have a game plan. Whether that be your specific strategy for what you're going to do in your planning time. Okay, so are you going to have 5 minutes to plan both essays at once, or are you going to have 5 minutes per essay to plan? And how are you going to plan? Are you going to use your scrap piece of paper, or are you going to do it on the computer? Are you going to draw a mind map, or are you going to write topic sentences? You really need to think about that and get it really nutted out before you sit the GAMSAT, so that then when you do sit down to take the test, you know exactly what you're doing, your confidence isn't shook around, you've got this game plan, you can stick to it, and it will really set you up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that as well, sometimes it's worth practicing just the process that you're going to go through. So if you practice just going through the quotes, I found that really helpful. Like, if you don't have, an hour to write 2 essays, maybe you just want to practice how you would make a plan in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
For a set of quotes. I found that really helpful as well, because often the hardest thing about writing these essays is figuring out what your opinion is.
Yeah. And finding examples to back those opinions up as well.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I would sort of start out by just scribbling down random words about what I thought about the topic, and then I would write down topic sentences and refine my thoughts. But I had to do that all in 5 minutes. I found that really challenging.
Yeah, and that is something we try to do with our students at Halad as well for section 2, is do these mini exercises, 10, 15-minute exercises of getting a bunch of different quotes, trying to figure out what that common theme is, because that can be much harder than students think as well. And then doing those mind maps, like Karim said, or just writing random words that help trigger ideas inside of you. Maybe writing down different examples that link to different ideas that link to the theme. All about training yourself to think about ideas and high quality examples and opinions in a really short amount of time, so that then when you have to do that in the exam setting, it's not really daunting and overwhelming.
So another tip, I think, is if it's your first time writing in a while, make sure that you trial different types of writing, and think about what your strengths and weaknesses are. So if you're a creative writer and you want to write a short story, by all means go for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And get lots of opinions on that as well. So if you've got friends that are also studying for the GAMSAT or have done the GAMSAT before, get them to read your writing and give you feedback on it, as well as you reading over your writing and giving yourself feedback. I think that is so key, to reflect on your own writing first and then get feedback from other people. If you don't have anyone that you know that could help you with that, we do have a Halad Section 2 essay marking service where you can submit your essays and they will be marked by 2 different tutors, just to give you that extra feedback to help implement different strategies to improve on your essays. But I think it really is important to read back over your writing and, critically evaluate your writing first before getting feedback from other people. And I think that leads to the final thing, which we've already sort of touched on, but it's really important to have a game plan for section 2. My game plan was very much, reading time, just analyze the different quotes, try to figure out what the theme is, and then from there, try to think of different ideas first, and then link the ideas to examples that I know. And I had a very set planning structure, this table method that I came up with and all my students would know about. I would use that every time without fail. But Karim, did you have a specific game plan for section 2?
Yeah, I did. So mine was, oh God, I haven't done this in a while, so I can't really remember. I think it was something along the lines of I would read the first 5 quotes in the 5-minute reading time and just spend that entire 5 minutes thinking about what I was going to write. I'll then spend another couple of minutes just jotting down a few different ideas, and they would translate to my the first sentences, the topic sentences I would use for each paragraph. And then I'll do exactly the same thing for the second one. So I didn't really feel like I got stuck, unless I think the bit I got stuck in would be figuring out the ideas.
Yeah. And that is hard, and that's what you really need to practice. And there's different strategies for this, which is sort of hard to go over in a podcast setting. But if you check out Allied to Health's YouTube channel, there are a couple recordings from free events that we've held where we give tips and tricks about this. But you want to have some sort of plan or activity for what you do if you really can't think of any ideas that relate to the topic. So there's a thing called theme-based writing, which I'll get you all to read about in your own time or listen to on our YouTube channel, because it is really hard to describe, but that can be a technique of how you can go about overcoming those situations where you can't think of any ideas.
Yeah. And is it about writing to a specific theme?
Yeah, so you pick out a theme that is broad enough that it relates to any topic that you may get at the GAMSAT, but is also unique enough that will help you create really powerful essays that aren't just your stock standard ones that everyone else is going to have.
So I think that actually leads on to our next part, which is about myth busting. So the first myth that I've heard a lot about is you can't memorize an essay and do well. But it sounds like you're saying you can memorize a theme.
Well, yes. So this is what I'm worried about. I want to talk about this, and there is a fine line that I don't want to cross. I absolutely do not support pre-writing essays, memorizing them, and then, word vomiting them in the GAMSAT. Because not only does that go against the whole point of the GAMSAT, but also it's really hard to pull off, I think, because you don't know what topic you're going to get.
Unless you memorized an essay for a specific topic and with those specific quotes, and then those quotes happen to come up, which is very hard to pull off.
Which is, if I was a betting woman, I would have put my money on it. The odds are against you.
That's very unlikely.
Yeah, it's very unlikely. So it's not really worth spending all that time memorizing an essay that probably isn't going to fit. But what I am saying with theme-based writing is that you can have a certain theme that you are passionate about. For example, my theme was rural health. And rural health can be tied into lots of different topics, about government legislation, about the one that we got was something like globalization or something like that. Something along those lines, which can be tied into, but then it can also relate to some task B topics, like love, family, things like that. It can be, it's like a broad enough topic that it can fit into both a bunch of different task A topics and a bunch of different task B topics. But it's also not me memorizing an essay. It's just me having a bit more knowledge and passion about a specific topic that makes it easy for me to fall back on that for ideas. So I wouldn't always write essays about rural health, but whenever I was stuck, when I got a topic, I would just say, right, how does this topic relate to rural health or rural healthcare or living in a rural area? Does that make sense how I did that?
Yeah, so it's like viewing the quotes through the lens of rural health.
Absolutely, yeah, because it relates it to something that I'm passionate about, so it's easier for me to come up with ideas. And also I know a few more examples about it, especially when I was studying for the GAMSAT. Like, I was reading rural health articles and listening to rural health podcasts all the time. So I had a lot of different examples in my head, so it was really easy to fall back on that for ideas. So if there is something that you're really passionate about, I do recommend having that as sort of like a theme that you can bring up when stuck for ideas. But I don't recommend writing an essay and then reproducing it in the GAMSAT, because
just don't do it.
Yeah, it's
just
not a good
bad.
idea.
It just looks bad. It looks like you're trying to force something.
Yeah, and I think a marker can absolutely tell. You know, we mark mock exams, and there's a couple of times where I just read the essay and I'm like, wait.
And it has nothing to do with the topic usually, so it's easy to pick out, essentially.
And even if it is a brilliantly written essay, you know, very fluent, strong ideas, strong opinions that are, you know, very eloquently written, great examples, unique essay, if it doesn't relate to the topic, I can't give them a good mark because it isn't answering the question, essentially.
And that's what they say. That's the instructions. It's like respond to one or more of the quotes above. So yeah, you need to make sure that you do that.
Yeah. It's like someone asking you, what is water made up of, and you writing 7.
Not answering the question.
Not answering the question. You need to answer the question.
And then just the final thing as well is like, make sure you, like, I think a myth is that you need to memorize quotes to do well in your essay. That's just not the case. Like, it's about arguing your idea well. It has nothing to do with like how good of an example you can give. Although if you can give great examples, that's just of benefit. But like, you don't have to have quotes memorized.
No, by like random historical figures.
Yeah, and the worst part of that is like sometimes students will memorize quotes and then just try to force them into a topic that they don't belong to. Yeah. And it just looks really clunky. So yeah, try to avoid doing it if you can.
Yeah, it's not one of those things that if you look at like study efficiently, it's not one of those things that has a large payoff. Instead, I would recommend, you know, reading different things or gaining different examples from talking to people, listening to the news, listening to different podcasts and opinion pieces, to get examples, but not memorizing them so that you can write them down word for word like a quote. That isn't, you know, an effective use of study time. Yeah,
and that's pretty much it for section 2. A bit of a shorter episode today, but hopefully one that you guys found really useful. Section 2 can be really fun because you get to express your point of view, and I think I found it quite easy to study for. Yeah.
Yeah, and it helps break up all of those, you know, multiple choice questions that you're churning through for the other sections. But if you do want some more help and guidance with section 2, definitely check out the Highlight Health Facebook and YouTube page, where we have lots of different recordings from our webinars, slide sets from our webinars and things like that you can go back to and use as a free study resource. We may also have some live events coming up, so that's why you should follow our Facebook page to stay up to date with any of that.
And our essay marking service as well at Hallard. You can just Google that.
Yeah, and that's open for you to get some feedback on your essays, which is key.
Very important.
But thank you all for listening to the podcast today. Make sure you tune into our next episode about the GAMSAT, which will be all about the devil section, section 3.
the third part of a 3-part series.
The worst part is yet to come.
Okay, all right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, bye. Thank you for listening to the Making of an Incredible MD podcast by Highlight Health. Please like, share, and subscribe to help spread the word about our podcast. And we'd love to hear your feedback. So send us an email or message on Facebook. All of our links are in the show notes. Thanks. We'll see you next time.